Hey, everybody, welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. I'm James Casada. Bob is out on a well-deserved trip up north, a little vacation. And we are taking this opportunity to have Nicole, Schroeder, and nope.
Oh my God. Are you serious? Are you serious right now?
Wow.
I thought 100% that was on purpose.
Yeah, me too. I was like, that was such a good, a funny bit to do.
I'll add my last name in here.
Nope.
Wow.
This could not be a more perfect start to a more perfect day.
But honestly, it has a ring to it.
Yeah.
Julia Schroeder and Nicole Pascaretta, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Nicole, are you okay?
Yeah, sorry. I was accidentally playing the show in my head. Like, the Facebook was playing in my ears, and I was like, ah! Sorry. I'm back.
This is going to be a show and tell episode where we talk about shows that we've been part of and what we learned from them. And of course, this will be about the Parent Trap Lord of the Twins trilogy, which this year, what was the first year? Was it 2014 or 15? I think 15.
15. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's been going on 5 years, which is crazy.
Wild.
And so just to give a brief description up top of what the show is before we talk about it, Parent Trap Lord of the Twins trilogy is a 2-woman written show of about 45 minutes long, and it features Julia and Nicole reenacting and retelling the story of the Parent Trap movie, the Lindsay Lohan version, of course.
1998.
Yeah. And the telling and reenactment has Lord of the Rings woven into it throughout. So there's themes of Lord of the Rings, which basically the idea is for the two of you to compare how epic of a movie and story the Parent Trap is for you to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Totally. Also, quick side note, we recently did rewatch Lord of the Rings, or James and I did, but it really reinforced for me like what this show and how comparatively epic the Parent Trap is to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, for sure.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, I can see by the second and third movie you're like, Lord of the Rings is catching up to the Parent Trap, and then by the end of the third one you're like, the trilogy as a whole does compare to 1998's.
Once you get to the end, and people have died, and the stakes are just so high to the point where it's like, okay, now they're in the same ballpark.
Yes, absolutely. So we're gonna get to the story behind the Parent Trap. Before we do that, 3 things. 1, boom. Hello from
Yes!
Mikey.
Oh my God.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Secondly, if you are watching, this is Improv FAQ, and we want to make this as much of an interactive experience. That's why we're doing it live. So as we go through the story of how Parent Trap came to be and what we learned from it, I should also mention that I directed the show. So
yeah, you did.
We will be
a very special show and tell series today because we're all here.
Yeah,
we're all interviewing each other, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit.
And you're interviewing us, so you better comment, and I'm saying that nicely.
In a nice way. In a nice way. We're also interviewing you in a nice way. Get ready.
Bring the questions. No holds barred. Ask me anything. But
ask me anything.
Anyway, so as the 3 of us tell the story of the show and what we learned from it, if you are watching, please feel free to ask questions if you got them. We'll be happy to answer any that we don't cover on our own. I think that was two things, but let's say that I forgot the third thing and just go to the story of how this show came to be.
Totally. I'll volunteer to start us off. So set the scene. 2015. Nicole and I we were buds by then, and we had realized a lot of millennials that we have a shared passion for the Parent Trap. But like anything that involves Nicole and me, it was just sort of heightened to the fact where like, I don't know, we had to do something about it. So we would always quote it. We would always just like talk about how much we loved it. And then I think the ticker was, James, you were a guest judge in a forensics tournament, and you were like, you had been telling us that like this is such a cool art form and we should like see it or whatever. I'm talking about forensics, which is competitive speech and acting. And so I went to go see the tournament that you were judging, and there are like a bunch of different events inside of this forensics tournament. But the thing that really stuck out to me was like these duos and multiples who, correct me once I get all of this wrong, but these like groups of performers who would take some sort of piece of art or a story or whatever and perform it, basically condense it and perform it in like a certain amount of time. And so I saw this. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
It's high school performance. They're on the acting side taking literature of any kind, which includes drama with a script, and cut what we call cutting it down to 15 minutes, which happens to be the time limit for performance. So you could do a selection of scenes from a thing, or really whatever you want to do with the script to cut it down. Most people in those duos and multiples choose to condense a full story down to 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, totally. And it sort of was just like very eye-opening what they were doing. And Nicole and I had already been talking about like, God, we should do something with this, because it's just so fun for us to like reenact these scenes, and like had so much fun with like the way a character might say something, and that's like a lot of our relationship anyway, is like heightening those little things that like feel like connect us or whatever. So this kind of jumped out at me as like, I wonder if we could take this idea or this like performance style and make that our show or whatever. So then I feel like we had a conversation in the lobby. I like told her what I had just seen. Yeah. Then we decided to go for it.
Yeah. And then Nicole, can you pick it up from there? Like take us to how it ends up being. Like the two of you approached me about doing something with the Parent Trap, and can you talk a little bit about that and where we wanted to put a performance with the variety show?
Yes. So I remember that moment we were in the corner of Go's lobby, and we literally, when Julie was telling me about it, I was like, ah! And so we walked up to James, and James was like, yeah, it's possible. And when James says something is possible, oh, wait, he can make anything possible. So with the fact that he was on board, we're like, okay, this can happen. So James was like, you guys should do it for the Matt Nas variety show, which was a show at Go Comedy that would happen every month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm like, my brain's losing that.
I know. A long time ago.
And it showcased like the best performers in Detroit, or if they're out of town, they can come. Okay, I'm doing a bad job. Okay, so and like bits were far and wide, like anything goes. And so that was kind of our goal, to put the show up at the Matt Nas variety show. So we didn't really like how everything came to be with the show. Like we kind of had like the root in forensics and the root of like how much we loved The Parent Trap. But what the show was going to turn out to be, I think, turned out to be a complete surprise to all of us. Totally. And the fact that like it was so perfect that we ended up doing 3 parts, and we debuted each part at the Matt and Oz variety show. So it created hype and excitement.
Keep coming back. Yeah, we can't understate like I think the kismet of like the Matt and Oz variety show happening at that time or whatever. And it really was like everyone was able to just kind of like pitch or audition for bits that they felt inspired by that weren't contained to like a sketch show or like a narrative play or whatever. It really like there was so much going on in these variety shows. It was really inspiring where people would pitch like these really creative, awesome things. So I think that allowed us to like kind of go forward, not really knowing what this was going to be, but knowing that this was a platform that I think we could like succeed with like putting something non-traditional at Go Comedy Improv Theater up.
Yeah. Excuse me. And that really is the unique combination of elements in the backstory, which is the forensics, which is unusual, like that style of performance, and which we can get to more once we talk about like the rehearsal process and actually developing the show. But the forensic style is very detail choreographed, meticulously rehearsed in script and movement, and it's a lot of like really sharp, detailed movement because you're condensing a story down so much that there's a lot of just like you have to kind of do it that way if you're going to go the route of taking a full story and condensing it down, which is not necessary. But if you're going to, you better be moving on point the entire time and getting the most out of every moment. And then the second thing is that the two of you being so excited about wanting to do something with the Parent Trap, and because you could act out all the scenes together, wanting to do something performance with it, but the nice niche place to put that, and really the only option was the variety show, which is not to say that the only option as in we had no other choice, but like if it weren't for the variety show, what would you have done? Because there aren't a lot of opportunities to put up kind of experimental or alternative style things. So having those two elements is a very cool combination of just time.
Yeah, it certainly gave us a platform for sure.
Yeah. And then so the other thing that I'll mention too, just to set up the next part, is that initially the goal was to do the whole show in about 8 minutes. That's 8 to 10 minutes. That's what forensics rules are. So we just figured we might as well stick to that. And secondly, the variety show was like 5 minutes.
Matt would tell people, 3 to 5 minutes. I guess if you go a little bit over, that's fine. Depending on what the bit is.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, we can do it in 8.
Yeah, and not only did we go over the time slot of the variety show 5-minute-ish window, but we couldn't, once we started writing and working on it, we couldn't get everything down to 8 minutes in a way that felt really satisfactory to us. So instead, that's when we decided to break it into 3 chunks. So how about, can you two talk about the writing process and actually developing the show, how we got started?
So we got assignments from James. So James was like oh man, my words are like so bad.
He's melting.
I wanted to say, obviously you're the director, but it was so cool, like how fluid and open the process was, and we really followed the inklings that like came to us, but also it was so structured at the same time. Like you had the forensic structure, but you were open to making it our own. So we started off without watching the movie again, without reading the plot on Google again. Not that we need to do, but like we wrote the entire movie, what happened in the movie, the entire plot of the movie from memory and what we remembered in our own words. And that's where it started. The word count started to get large because we are so passionate about the show that we had so much to say. And then from there, we had a different assignment, like, write a teaser or a blurb or a trailer for the movie and do it in different genres. Like do 5 different takes describing the entire movie and show in like a paragraph. And that's when we like started to lean into the genres. And that's when our voices really, like even just describing the movie, because it's so passionate, our voices, like our true voice came out. And then when we did the genre, because we have such wild imaginations and such wild like thoughts about how we felt about those moments, especially like as people too. So there was like so many different things happening, but we didn't realize it. We're like, oh, and when I was 8 years old, like Julia can explain how she tapped into her inner child.
No, Nicole, you're so right. Because like when someone describes something that they're passionate about, and especially if it's like retelling the plot of a movie, I think a lot is uncovered. It's almost like a performance in itself, which there have been shows where James has directed where a bit in it is like, okay, retell the plot of a movie. But anyway, so yeah, simply in that first assignment of us telling the plot, I think there was like nuggets of like, oh my God, this is sort of like a script. This is sort of, our voices were, like Nicole said, like coming through. And each of these assignments, I think like more and more our like voices became very clear of like, okay, this could be like the skeleton of the script for the show. And then the genre stuff kind of became like, oh, this is sort of like a thematic we're seeing. I mean, we tried like different ones, but that like fantastical hero's journey. I think especially Nicole's take on this was just like like fairy tale kind of like, and then the girls roamed into I mean, you can just hear Nicole's voice on a page or whatever. And then I think that became like the clear, like, this is sort of a theme that's gonna like come throughout the show.
And I think the other cool thing that I didn't realize, but what James did as a director was he pointed out things that we wrote that were very funny or were very interesting, but we didn't notice because it's like, oh, like I'm just literally writing how I write. So that was such a cool like perspective, like, because that was helpful to find my voice. And I don't want to speak for you, but
yeah,
but like, because sometimes it's easier to do it through a character, not easier, but I tend to do more like character or not myself. So it was cool to find what's funny about the heightened Nicole.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think like, because this was just like a show, it's different from sketch. It's different from like, you know, a play. It's like based out of like narration, which I think like the narration quality of performance lends itself very well to the two of us. And it would be little things for anyone who hasn't seen the show, like how this writing process really showed itself to be like, oh, this is different, this feels cool. James would point out those little moments, like maybe the flippancy of like vocabulary that we would use to like describe big moments, or like the gravity we would apply to like these small moments, whether that was like because that we thought the movie meant so much, or because it meant so much to us as kids, like Nicole is saying, watching it like in our lives, it meaning so much to us as like Nicole and Julia.
Yeah. and so this is what I remember happening, and I could be wrong. I could just be reframing it in my head, but I think I told you both to write the story from memory, not to talk to each other, just write the plot of the movie from memory, and both of you who are gluttons for rules and directed are like, well, how long does it need to be? And I was like, keep it to like, I said keep it to 1 or 2 pages. Julia came back with like a page and a half, and it was like, okay, solid. We have a condensed story here of like five paragraphs of the movie. And then Nicole came back with like 5 pages, and a lot of it was just these flights of fancy in these really long embellished paragraphs about like the girls being taken away like prisoners and the ghoulish other campers scowling at them. And yeah, so I think that was the beginning of being like, okay, well, maybe there is not only it wasn't just that we couldn't get it down short enough to fit the initial target of 8 minutes. It was also that it seemed like there was enough content and enough fuel from the two of you to do more than that. And then, yes, Nicole definitely, I think that's the obvious carryover of like genre into the script that we ended up with. And then also Julia's like quips and commentary. There was a lot of like sarcasm in the way that Julia did the retelling. So those two things really became like the kind of two sides of the coin for the show, of the quips and commentary, the way that you kind of see in YouTube videos that like review all the plot holes in a movie or whatever. That attitude was in Julia's writing. And then the genre that was like, well, if your memory of it without rewatching the movie first is just to be like, there was a devil of a woman, whatever your phrasing is, like lean into that.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess in short, I'll say in terms of like what I learned from the process as a director was actually that I had, as a coach of forensics, which I coached forensics for like 10 years as the assistant director of my old high school. Shout out to Waldeck Western.
Shut up.
We're always talking, we don't do a lot of original content, right? We're always using somebody else's script and kind of like doing script analysis to like figure out what the intention is, and then trying to put like, well, what do you have to say about what the author has to say? Or like what speaks to you and how do you want to put that in your own voice? And for you two, it was a little bit more on the original content side, because you are retelling the story, but we didn't go finding a Parent Trap script. And so the voice was more heavily yours. And I hadn't directed like a scripted show. Is that true? 2015? Yeah, maybe I had done like one scripted show before, but as a director. But this was a time when I really learned that what I love about being a director is taking what the writer is intending and trying to help blow that up for them, as opposed to trying to be like, whoa, sometimes it's necessary to be like, you're way off the rails, or like it's too long or whatever. But there's other times when it's like, well, if this is going to be your thing, then it better be your thing. Like, I'm not going to try and curtail it or correct course to what I think is right. I'm going to try to figure out what it is you're trying to do and help you say it bigger and better with collaboration. That's really where this show was the first time that I really got to indulge in that and explore that approach to things. What did you turn to learn from just the writing process? We can also talk about the staging and choreography of it, but just the writing process, what else did you learn?
I would say for me, like, to this day, I've said this before, it is the best example of my writing. I think, like, of my voice. I feel like I found my voice in the show, and especially coming up like in performing, you know, I feel like when I'm in writing processes or like in sketch shows, like I'm like, oh my, when you're reading your sketch out loud, you're like, oh my God, is this funny? Like, what is funny? Am I like, for writing, it's just like insecure because it is like a piece of you. And for this, like, it was so cool and that's like, it was so uniquely us. There was nothing else out there like that because we did blow up what we saw was ourselves. Like you were saying, like so it has to be unique because everyone is different. So it was so cool to be like, what my voice is entertaining. And so that it gave me so much confidence in writing and creating and like knowing, like to trust my instincts of like what our instincts were in each assignment. It worked. And like you as a director, like confirming, like lean into this, keep developing this. And like, and just even just reflecting on it like over the years and like hearing the show again and even not knowing who wrote what, like at a certain point. But just being like, what, we wrote that? Like being impressed. I don't know. Like it's so valuable and rewarding. And like, in the fact that it came out of passion. They say in interviews with like, I listen to a lot of interviews of like people I admire, and they're always like, the things that take off are the things that are like, I did this with my friends. We loved this thing. We had fun with it. We made each other laugh. We made each other like literally pee our pants laughing. And we didn't go into the Matt Nas variety show thinking like, oh, we're going to perform this in New York one day for Meredith Blake, you know? Like, and it just transpired to that. But it's so cool. Like those are the projects like you can't force either. I don't know if this is a learning thing. I'm going off, but it was, yeah, but it was just cool to, I would say like in the writing process, I found my voice and I trust my voice and listen to the instinct of as a writer and a creative and work with baller people. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do think that is a good point, that like we didn't go into it thinking that it was going to be a show that we would do forever and that Elaine Hendricks would see. That is a good point. We went into it truly with like, I don't know what this is going to be. It was literally a passion project, but I think like on the writing side of it, it was very surprising to me that we could just go off and it would end up being we could just turn that into a script. That was wild to me. That was just like very cool to see the transformation of us like wanting to like retell like our love for this movie, and then the transformation of just that feeling to the page into something that we could perform was mind-blowing to me. And I think I like really was like, these assignments that were given are the funnest thing that I've ever had to do. And like those really, I think, opened up a writing style that I don't think that I was able to like access before. Yeah.
Because it's not a script. Like we never put it into like a stage or screenplay style formatted script. It's really just like a lot of outline and block paragraphing. So it's an unusual writing style. Had either of you done like a ton of writing before? Because I'm just curious, like up till this point when we started working on this, how much volume of writing you had done, because based on the assignments that I had given you to flesh out the script for this, we wrote probably at like twice as much as we needed, especially considering that you were kind of writing in tandem, and then I would kind of stitch together both of your writing into a fused script. But was that a big difference in your memory of like just the volume of writing?
Sorry, you go.
I was just gonna say, I had taken sketch classes at Go Comedy. I think I had written for the that class show. I think I was doing some like random stuff, and then I think Reclassify Pluto had started writing the I think that was this year. Yeah. Reclassify Pluto had started writing a 1-act for Planet Ant. But even then, I didn't really, I enjoyed it, but I didn't really know what. Yeah, I would say like not. I didn't feel like I could write a show by myself. I still don't.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's it.
For me, I think just at that point, I just did the Ant process. So it was a sketch show, and other than that, I think what this process reminded me of, now looking back, is like I would write stories as like a kid, and like even the way I would journal, like I remember I would be like, said with a question mark look on her face, like what? So like the way I feel like wrote as a kid came out in this, but it did not come out in sketch processes, and that was cool. But I wasn't, when it was happening, I wasn't recognizing it, because the assignments pulled us in so deep that I wasn't like, I'm writing part 1 right now. It was like, this is the assignment. We have to get it done by tomorrow at 5. So like, and then we would write so much, it wasn't necessary, Nicole. I'm the girl that comes in with like an 8-page sketch. Never do that. But it was cool that everyone had the patience and passion to go through everything.
Yeah.
Like we went through all the writing, and so I would say that this, but I didn't recognize it as like we're writing a show. It was more like, yeah, like Julia said, like this is so fun that we get to write about, like dive into like, because we then detailedly talked about different scenes, like, you know, that was just another assignment, but it was just like, oh, now we get to talk about like when the girls messed with Meredith on the camping trip, like, and dive into that. So it was always just more present versus like being outside and zooming out. Like in a sketch process, it's like, oh, we're putting up that show. I hope I get a sketch in. Oh God, like hope I get inspired. But this was like, I'm in it, I'm present, which that's hard to do.
Yeah, very much like building it as we went. Totally. And the show was created from like whatever we ended up writing. Yeah, as opposed to like, okay, we need a game sketch here. Okay, I guess we'll take yours.
You haven't had anything in. Do you have a blackout?
It's maybe a joke pitch here. Don't get me wrong, I love sketch. But yeah, this was just very different.
True.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting to me, because honestly, we haven't really talked about this exact angle before. But I think personally, I haven't written for anything as much as you wrote for this show. And if you didn't notice, or it didn't feel, that's not something that sticks out to you, is the volume. And so it has to be because it was a project of passion and so much fun. And to, I think both of you said it, but Nicole might've brought it up first, which is just when you're writing and following the fun, that is going to give you fuel for days, as opposed to trying to start with the putting any pressure on yourself of like, oh, I want to do this, and to serve an ideal or an idea of an audience or an end product first, to just start from a place of like, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's fun and I'm passionate about it. So
yeah. Well, and I mean, we should also say that we were like retelling a story that was already told, and then like building off of that. So that is, I mean, it was like easier than, okay, we have to like make up a story or something.
Yeah, you don't have to figure out what the ending is.
Right.
Right. Yeah. True.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay, so let's talk about the physical aspect of it, because the show, this is a little harder to describe than the writing process, which is that if you haven't seen the show, you know, it's a lot of it's almost as fluid as dance. There's a lot of abstract kind of like space bending, where because Nicole and Julia are playing multiple characters, what you would see a lot in improv is people, you know, doing what we call character steps, where you are on stage as one character in one place, and then you walk to another area of the stage to be that character. But we would try to find the most efficient use of space. And sometimes you would just snap back and forth between a character in one posture standing straight up, and then another one who's kind of like crouching, and just adjusting your focal point, your line of sight. That's how you move from one character to another. So there's a lot of snapping into characters and snapping from scene to scene. And there's also a lot of like sort of leaving behind the idea of scenery or setting, and just being like, we are kind of like twisting around each other right now, because the idea is that we're in a whirlwind of the story or whatever. Like, so there's a lot. One, there's a lot of abstract shit going on. Two, there's a lot of really specific, detail-oriented movement going on. So can you talk to me about what you learned from that kind of process?
Yeah, I think the physicality is probably what makes this show most unique. I think the writing is one thing, and it's very much us, but the physicality, I feel like, is what takes this show to like, what did they just do? How did they do that? And of course, it's like based out of forensics, but the two of us are, I mean, Nicole is a dancer. I used to dance. We're both like athletic or whatever, and very much like physical performers. And I mean, Nicole, who can just do a high kick out of the ground, like that kind of energy gets to be then like choreographed to a T and used to like jump in and out of characters, or like reenact a very specific part of the show. And I learned, one, that I am obsessed with this type of performance. I feel like it's when I'm having most fun on stage, I think, is when like I get to fully use like my like body. And then I think the second thing I would say is like, it again blew my mind how much of this show came to life when we choreographed each and every single moment. It was just like, this is the most fun I'm ever having, and this is blowing our minds, and we hope it's gonna blow like audiences' minds too when they see it.
Yeah, I feel like it really did, because we both did sports growing up, and I feel like sometimes like I'll look back and be like, oh, I wish I did just theater my whole life, you know, but like without that sports background, that lended our performing style. I think it is in our performing style, and it brought me back to like my cheerleading days and like hitting the routine and like having everything have to be on the specific count, or if you're off, we will literally hit each other and we will run into each other. And we had to like tighten up certain like those turns. Like if we haven't done it in a while, we're gonna like hit each other.
Yeah.
But it also, what I learned, which was so cool, is like if we did the script just talking out loud, sometimes we wouldn't know the words. But like if we were physical, like it helped me memorize the script. And I realized like putting a physical movement to something like helped me remember my lines. And like we had pages and pages of script to memorize, which also blew my mind that I could do, because that is like a fear of mine, like not being able to memorize, like I'm not as fast as a memorizer as others. So it was so cool to like recognize, I think in the rehearsal process, I think James brought it up, like we did the physicality loosely as we were learning the show, even like in part 2 when we did the video of it, like kind of the skeleton, the bones of the script, and literally we're like, it sounds like gibberish. If we should put a link to, because I have it on YouTube. Like we're like, and then Dad went to Napa, and like, and then we
Mom, beige. And it's a video of us, because like Nicole said, that is how we that is how the three of us built the show. Is okay, we're in rehearsal and we're going over from this line to this line. The show's written, the lines were written. So we have like, okay, from today, we want to get from here to here. So, okay, this line is, you know, and Hallie can't believe her dad is real or whatever. And Hallie can't believe her dad is real. So now we choreograph like, okay, our physicality might be like whatever it is. This is such a bad example, and that's not a line in the show. But like, and Hallie can't believe her dad is real. Like, and then we would choreograph it down to the exact like movement. And like that's how we learned the lines. I don't know if we would have been able to otherwise, like you said.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I mean, and I wasn't even thinking about it in even knowing we were going to be talking about like what you learn through each part of the process, but that is a huge element of it, is that attaching movement to dialogue. It is more meticulous, but like once then you have this attachment of like meaning, you know, and storytelling. There is storytelling in the movement at least as much as there is in the words. So then it changes the way that you memorize things, because it feels incomplete when it's just the words, like you were saying, Nicole. And then also just has this long lasting imprint on you. And I think that that's true for the audience too, is that like the physical visual memory of the way that you would move or stage things in the show, again, is a part of the storytelling and a takeaway of the experience of the audience. So for a show that could be very word dense, if we were only going for quips and sarcasm and criticism, that would probably be funny like a stand-up show, but it wouldn't be as theatrical without those meticulous choreographed physical storytelling elements.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this has to do with the physicalness, but I had many times during the show out-of-body experiences. And this could be spiritual, so maybe I should talk about this somewhere else. But I literally would be out of my body because we're like so like physical. And then I would have to be like, girl, go back. You're doing a show. But like, it was so ingrained into my body, the words, the physicality, that I could literally like almost watch us do it and have clear thoughts.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yes, totally. I think that comes with like just knowing the show so well too. But I think you're so right that like knowing what your next movement and line is going to be really is like, it's a weird feeling.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so actually that'll take us right into what you learned from performing the show. Because so the kind of in a nutshell timeline of things is that you were debuting each part of the show for the Matt and Oz variety show once a month. And then there was 1 month off there where maybe Nicole was out of town or the variety show was off for a month or something. But so you initially built it. Part 1 debuted. A month later, part 2 debuted. And then the finale, part 3 debuted. And so for at least those months, when you did the newest version, you were leaving the last one behind. But eventually, once you had all 3 parts done and premiered, you got your own featured show slot. At first as a one-off, which sold out, right? To do all 3 parts together in the same block, and then you had a 1-month run of the show, and that's in Michigan at Go Comedy, and then there's like this second chapter, as if that's not full of chapters on its own. There's coming to New York and trying to produce it here. So one, I mean, I definitely want to talk about like what it's like once you perform it so much and you're starting to do all 3 parts repetitively. But like, let's talk about debuting them. Starting with like what it felt like to do the first one, what you learned from like talking to people about the show after you did the first one, and then like how you built that up to the final 3rd act being premiered. So what was the feeling? Because you hadn't performed something like this by the time you did the first one. So like, what was the feeling doing the first one?
I think the first one, we were just giddy. We were like, I don't know if anyone is going to like this. I don't know, but we like it. We think it's cool. I remember at rehearsal, we had Bree, who was familiar with forensics, and she saw it and she was just pumped. And Bree's so nice that it's like, is she just being nice? But like, you could kind of tell that she was like, this is gonna be different, and it doesn't matter what happens. Like, this is a very cool show. That was sort of like all we needed. Bree's like approval and James's approval, but that was like a cool moment where like, oh, okay, this might be like a really fun thing. And I remember it was pure excitement for the first one / like, who cares how this goes and how it's received. We had been telling people we were working on a Parent Trap show, and I think everyone was sort of expecting like, okay, Julia and Nicole are going to be crazy and they're going to like talk about the Parent Trap. But I think this sort of like blew everyone's expectations out of the water. Like it just, if you see the show, it just is like very different from anything you probably would expect. It's like, so I think we were excited to like, at the very least, show that.
You put a ton of work into it and to do something unique. And so to have that pay off or be validated, I'm sure it would have been fun and fine. Even if people were kind of like, oh, this is what it is. But to have, I remember Matt Penridge came up to you two after the show and we're like, oh, they have this intro that seems like rapid fire and highly choreographed. And he was like, oh, eventually they're going to drop that and kind of go into like just riffing with the audience and off of each other. And then at a certain point, he said that his mind goes, oh, they're just going to keep going.
Yeah, that fast-paced nature. I mean, you kind of have to be ready for it. And if you're not, like, figure it out. You might just miss the entire intro.
Yeah, my grandma definitely didn't pick up anything. But
my grandma was
she was literally like, I don't know what you said, but you look like you had a good time. No, but she also, Italian is her first language also. But but that was another thing that I think was different about how we approached the show, because there wasn't like an end goal of like, we are going to get a run of shows. Like literally it was to do the Matt and Oz variety show. And a lot of people, when they did like bits and stuff for the show, like they didn't put that much time into it. I'm not calling anyone out, but I remember people, like friends of mine being like, why are you guys rehearsing so much? Like not in a bad way, but like, I don't like it's just confusing.
Yeah.
And then like, cause you're just doing like, you just get like a slot. But then when they saw it, they were like, the fact that you took it to that level for literally because you wanted to do the show.
Totally.
Like, I think that was like a cool thing that like we didn't question, but like, and I think that speaks to James as a director, because he doesn't just do something a little bit. He's going full out. If he believes in you and he's into it and passionate, it's not going to be like a cat. Like, we're going all out. We're not going to just do it a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah, and I guess this is actually something that I learned more from the rehearsal process than once it was on its feet in performance. But this was also probably the, like, outside of coaching forensics, where like you know, these high school kids are it's competitive. They want to win tournaments, and they're working on these pieces in all these different stages, and they need help. And so, like, as a coach, if I was around to work with people, like, I would be able to kill 3 hours in a relay of working with students, no problem. And they were happy to have coaches around, because it's very difficult to work on something by yourself that without having somebody with an outside eye. Well, for which is true for anything, but like, when again it is with this like abstract and specific detail, it's that much harder to be like, is this working, unless you have somebody on the outside kind of bouncing ideas off of you and seeing it as an audience. And so I would be really into spending as much time and back to back sessions coaching with students. And then, since getting into like improv and sketch and theater, I had not found a combination of people that were willing and interested in working as much as I was working. People need breaks and need to like be chill. And I think that's fair. That's something that I need to adjust to, because sometimes that like I want to work so much to a fault. But this was a really interesting experience of like, okay, I would be like, well, if you wanted to be ready with this by next time, that would be cool. And you two would be like, yeah, and if we'll do twice as much if you want. And then I would be like, okay, well, actually, ideally, maybe we could do this. And then you two would be super down with it.
And maybe we could do a 10 to midnight rehearsal on a weeknight. Whatever it took to like get more time together, we would do.
Or we did we would do like 6-hour days on a Saturday with the theater open. And that was exciting. It's like, I again, I understandably wouldn't be able to expect most other projects and shows to commit that kind of time, but the fact that you two were as willing as I was to commit was a really great experience, and something that you don't get out of everything. So it is an opportunity too to be like, where are my limits of how much time I would spend if it was entirely up to me, or if I knew that the people I was working with were into it as much. That was very cool. But sorry, that kind of got us off track from the performance side of things and what we learned.
Oh, that's a great point.
I feel like oh, sorry. I wrote some notes down, but like a lot of things I learned can sometimes go into like what I not would do differently, but like some of these things are kind of similar. So I don't know if I okay, something I learned is connecting before the show. Connecting with Julia before the show, because the one time we didn't was what I would do differently.
Yeah, is that the third act?
Yes, third act. So we did have not as much time before. I think I was on a trip. There was just a tighter turnaround for part 3, and it also was longer. I don't know. There was just like a lot of aspects about it. And I remember someone telling me, I think it was Jeff Smike. He said, I noticed you two before the show, before part 3, before we debuted it, you weren't in the green room together. Like, we were both separate. Like, because I was freaked, like I was nervous.
I was also assistant, like,
that's true,
running that show, and I feel like, maybe I don't know. Yeah, keep going.
We normally would have been more like, when we're more confident, we're more like dancing in the green room. But I feel like I was like in the corner, like going over my lines by myself, when it was normally like we would be like goofing around, which is important to do before a show, I think. Like having those, like that was such a huge learning thing for me, because I feel like that would have helped. I just feel like I was in my own head and in myself, but if I would have connected with you before part 3 that day, we can talk about.
Yeah. And because by that point, you've done the first 2, and then you move on and do the final act. And that thing that we were talking about before about like doing it for fun and not caring how it goes, as long as like you are in it and passionate and having fun with it, like all of a sudden the kind of pressure and the stakes and the expectations start to creep their way back in, and you're like, we better fucking kill this third act to really measure up to what people are expecting. And yeah, so what happens in the third act when you guys debut it for the first time in the Matt Nas Variety Show is that the two of you get on stage, and about 30 seconds into the show, maybe like 8 or 10 lines of dialogue deep, you both go blank. I forget what the term is for it, because TJ Jagodowski has a story about it, but you both just go completely blank, and forget where you're at in the script, and that's it. Like you and then it's like a minute of the two of you standing there trying to figure out if it's going to come back to one of you in front of a sold out audience, and then eventually Julia's like, we'll be right back, and y'all hustle backstage and check in with the script.
Hold on.
We literally breathed. We stood in front of the audience and breathed for a minute and a half. That is like 5 hours in human time. We were like,
minute and a half.
I just kept thinking, this isn't real. I don't think this is real. It's every person's nightmare. Every actor's nightmare is like, oh, I'm on stage and I don't remember my lines. And we literally were on stage. Nothing was coming to us.
That I've learned the most from that moment than anything in my life. Maybe that's not true, but I learned so much from that moment, and it literally was worst case scenario. Like, you don't remember. It's such a scripted show that it's not like we could like improvise through it, but like, also I learned that we needed to use that skill to be honest and vulnerable. What I learned, it gave me such a relief, actually, because one of my problems in life, in performing as a human, is I want to be perfect. I wanted to nail it. I wanted to say every word correctly. I wanted us to have that physicality down, but it's live theater, and we need to acknowledge in that moment to each other, oh God, Julia, I don't know the line. We could have said, and like James, you talked about it. You gave us the permission, like, you can do that. You know the show so well. This is your show. It's just you two. Yeah. You are being yourselves. You're being vulnerable. Like, it was the most real moment ever. And we could have, like, looking back, and if any bumps have occurred, which makes the show, and it's a beautiful thing. It makes it unique. It shouldn't be the same every time. There should be moments where, like, I say something a little different, and it affects, it makes the moment different. Yeah. And like, we, in that moment, could have called that, I mean, we learned from it. This is what we learned, is like, we can be honest to each other, to the audience, to everybody, and move on from it and find the script. But we were so out of our minds that, like, we had to go backstage, pull up the Google Doc on our phones and look up the script to know what the next line was. Yeah. And it was my line, but like, Julia didn't know what was next either. Like, we either of us knew what was next, and we kept like even doing the physicality to try to remember, and it just wasn't there. But I think we put the stakes so high on ourselves. it was getting hyped. People were excited. It was the final. It was the finale. It was a big deal for us. And I think there was a lot of pressure. And I also remember James bringing up a story, because when we talked in the powwow, we had a talk after, and James said, like, he told a story about how Will Smith would like memorize the script of all the actors on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air because he was so worried about his lines.
That's so funny.
That. Yeah. That story. And he like you because it just shows like that, like, not to like, but I know Julia's lines. She knows my lines. You know, you have to know a show like inside and out.
Yeah, we've done that. We've done it where we like just as a, you know, a joke, we'll like do each other's parts. It's very different from like other shows where like one, you might like do a show enough to where like you could probably do other people's lines, but this is like, it makes a lot of sense that we would know each other's lines because we've done it so much and because it's so like seamless in the same thing every single time. But it's also a little bit crazy because there are so many lines per minute where like there's a lot to know. And we just weren't as prepared for this third one, because I think in another like circumstance we would be able to like breathe for a second and be like, oh my god, we literally don't know this. But in that instance, in that situation, we didn't know the script enough to even comprehend that. It was like we feel a little bit like we are trying this for the first time. The other two that we had done, we were like, we know this front to back and we've done the mess ups, and if we do mess up during this one, we can come back from it. It's fine. And especially as we did the show more throughout our years, like we know it enough to where like we could literally do anything we wanted and get right back on track. But at this point, we hadn't like rehearsed. We hadn't had enough rehearsal time. We didn't put in enough time to like have this particular third act to where we could like have those little glitches happen and get right back on track. It had to be perfect for us to do it the first time, and it wasn't. And that's also like, I also learned that it's like, fine, the worst thing that could possibly happen in a show happened, and everybody was on our side and right there for us when we came back on stage after a minute and looked at our lines, and they were even more excited, and we felt a little bit better. I mean, we were probably even more stressed the second time we came back out.
Yeah.
But we did it, and everybody was on our side, and like, of course that was like a moment that people remember, but it's not a moment that it's like, well, those girls will never make it. It was like, oh my god, we were like, didn't know whether we should laugh or like whatever, but like everybody felt for us in that moment because it was a very wild experience.
Yeah, man. So a couple things I got to mention. One, we're over the usual hour that we do for live streaming, but we're okay to go over. If you've been watching this far, thank you. If you're just joining, we're talking Parent Trap, and I think we're just getting to the juicy stuff. So I'm okay to go as long as you two are.
Oh yeah.
And also a reminder. Hello, Dean. If anybody watching has questions as we go here, you're more than welcome to chime in with questions, and we'll do our best to answer them on top of the other stuff that we're talking about. But so this moment where you freeze on stage, it's miraculous to me that you both dropped the script at the same time, because you both do know each other's lines and know the things. It was like this unifying like additional way that you two kind of become one mind.
If you don't know it, I don't know it.
Yeah. It was a very, you know, it is what it is, but like outside of the context of performing, as an observer and somebody who's very invested in the moment where this happened, and while I'm watching, Like, I was like, this is the miracle of human existence. Like, I mean, the fact that you both had this shared moment and of vulnerability, and then the lesson that comes along with it of that, like, at performing, what is the worst case scenario? Like we put all this pressure on these stakes on ourselves to perform and do well and deliver to the audience and not look like idiots. But like, what are we afraid of? What's the worst that can happen when we're performing on stage? Why is it revealing ourselves to people and performing in front of other people? Why is that one of the scariest things to do? And I think the moment that you two had in experiencing one of the biggest fears really seemed just like a profound learning moment of, like, there it is. We were in free fall and we hit the ground and we survived.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. And Nicole mentioned this a little bit too, but like that, I think that is the beauty of theater. And I think we both learned like those like raw, honest, like moments are clown moments that both of us do, like that, like every moment is real, and it's actually exciting that can happen rather than like this scary.
Yeah. Okay. And then I also want to talk about not after that point, you've got the 3 parts premiered and you start to do repeat performances of like act 1 and act 2 together. And then you do your own show and a show run. As you start like rehearsing, let's talk about like, how does improv come into play in such a detail oriented show? Where does improv start to reappear in that process?
Well, I think like we found such cool discoveries, which is just like improv. Like when you discover something in the moment with your scene partner, if Julia said a line to me in a way she never has, it's exciting to me. And I, in turn, react like instantaneously differently. And then we build on that. And the more times we even have that moment and like we do it again, maybe, but we're like lean into it more. Like, for example, I feel like when we would like be like, there's a part where they find out and then they find out they're twins. And I feel like we'd be like, oh, and then they became best friends. And I'd be like, or like you would do it like the kiss in ear. And like, I feel like that just like grew more and more of like a hugging each other moment, and like leaning into like loving each other in that moment. Or just like how we played the characters. Like we know like Julia, when she's in Chessie, she is Chessie. And I feel like you can throw anything at her when she's in Chessie and she's going to respond as Chessie. So it's like, I feel like we discovered really cool, fun moments like you would in improv and stayed in character, or we're more ourselves in certain moments, or just definitely played off each other's energy. And yeah, it made such a scripted show and such a timed show. It makes it complete. It can be completely different every time.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like you nailed it. I feel like the memorization part, it's almost like it is still feels like an improv show at this point in time, because each moment we have to find that that emotion. I guess I'll start with like, to memorize this show, I think, is one thing. And like, we had to get to a certain threshold to where like we knew it so well that we could just now feel free to perform it however like it feels in that moment. But it did need to reach like maybe, I don't know, 3 times of performing the show or something. I don't know, who cares? But
there's some threshold where the memorization gets to a point where you don't have to think about it anymore. And so you have more freedom in doing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And like Nicole said, like then each moment becomes like improvised. Sort of, I think of those things as like the out of body experiences. Like I know what I'm going to say and I know how I know what the physicality is, but it can be so different. Like the way we deliver each line can be different depending on how Nicole said the line before it, or how, I mean, part of it too is like, we know this movie so well. So as we're doing these like different parts, we might get inspired by like a certain like point in this movie, like, you know, Martin and Annie doing their handshake and saying goodbye at camp for the first time. That might like ring true in one moment doing this show, like, and we do it a little bit differently, or it like we might feel more vindictive about you know, Annie or Hallie or Meredith or whomever at the time. Like all of these things, without, I mean, that is improv. We have to be able to like take whatever's like delivered to us and react in whatever way feels like right in that moment.
We even had parts of the show where we like felt like something was missing, like, oh, like we didn't get to this moment is like really funny to call out, or like this feels missing, or like we touched on this but we should. So we would, I remember James would say like just kind of have like improvise what, like, I think it was calling out that Meredith
we don't see her at all
she just like pieces, and it's like, let's dive into that a little bit more. And like we improvised that and then eventually made it into the script. And we also did that with our intro, like explaining how the show came to be, because I think a lot of people sometimes, if you're coming off the street seeing the show and you have no context, like we needed to clue the audience in a little bit more. So we improvised that. And also, I don't know why, like throughout this entire conversation, I keep thinking about the Elastic Time Canon with this show. And for a few reasons. One, that how that improv show was so, like we rehearsed so many times for that very structured form. And like when a form, like an improv form is so structured, it's so structured and so nuanced and so detailed that that's when you can have fun. That's when you can break the threshold. Like you're saying, like this show is so scripted. We know it so well. That improv form is so tight and like there's so many different parts to that form, but that allowed me to do my best improv too. And that allowed me to do my best performing when something is so structured. Like I, as a person, I maybe need intense structure, but that allows me to be free. It's such an interesting thing.
Totally.
That is. There's like a whole new kind of freedom in a certain degree of restriction. Like once you put the restrictions on more and more, it's like there's a whole different brand of freedom in there, which I think on an acting level is like a reminder that like improv is more about what you say, or improv is not just about what you say. It's not just about ad libs or not having a script. It's about the uniqueness in each moment. And I think about what the two of you were able to do in this show, being very musical, that like you would get into a groove with each other and deliver a line with like this sort of, you know, a new intonation of like, wah, 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 and then, you know, Nicole would follow that up with like, wah, 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 like, and, you know, whatever the initial delivery was is different, and you would yes and just that intonation in a very musical way, like it's a call and response or an echoing thing of like la la la, and then you know the next line would be elongated or punched or whatever, and it's like it changes. And I think that's a really big challenge for people in acting and scripted material, and I know especially in forensics that when you have something that is about memorization and knowing it and doing something repeatable, that you can lose the spirit and the energy very quickly because you are sort of on autopilot. It becomes very mechanical. And I think there was certainly a hump that the two of you had to get over in repeat performances of this as well. But once you do, the improv is in how long you choose to take with this moment, and the notes that you use with the words, and the way that you communicate with those nonverbal things is wonderful.
It's so cool.
Yeah. Oh my God, I know.
Because it did happen naturally. I feel like it was like almost a reflection. Like it would be thought, like talked about, like after, like, oh, did you notice that you did this when she did this? And I'm like, oh my God, like it was not purposeful. It was in the moment. And that it is so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think that the takeaway, because it's a unique show, so it's like to me the biggest takeaway is that like the and kind of like you were saying with the Elastic Time Canon, that's a show where in the beginning we're trying to memorize and repeat lines very quickly, and it's like even when you're doing that, there's this attention and treatment that you have to approach it with, where it's like it's not, there's so much playground inside of the words. Your first idea of how to deliver it is only one of millions of ideas on how to deliver it, and when you really start to notice and play around with the words, I think that's where you want to be as an actor when you pick up any script and do a cold read, is see more and more possibilities and hear them as they're developing in the moment, so that you can lean into them and not get caught up in how you think it should be, and letting that compete with how you're actually doing it. It's like let the way you're actually doing it win, you know?
Yeah.
And it keeps you in the moment. Like in the Elastic Time Canon, I wasn't freaking out about like, oh, like, should I enter the scene? Am I going to be funny? Like, what am I going to say? Like, because everything was there, that took that element out of it, even though we should keep that mindset in like when you don't know what your line is, because when you are there and in the moment and with the people and you take the headiness out, like that is when the most beautiful shit occurs. And that's so interesting that I find that when something is so structured that I'm like, oh, this takes the pressure off. And then you can be yourself and be your best.
Yeah.
Totally. So let's talk about the second main chapter, which is putting it up in New York. What are some of the biggest takeaways or learning experiences from switching your environment and goals with the show?
Yeah. This was so interesting because I think like we knew how good the show was, but we didn't know the New York landscape, and we didn't know anyone really. And I think this show has and had so much like potential to, you know, just like be something extraordinary, and it is, and it was. But I think like I don't know that we ever found in New York where that lived. I mean, we put it up at improv theaters and some other, you know, random little spaces that did unique work. And one, you know, it's very hard to get an audience. It was hard, you know, after our first like couple runs at Go to get audiences, even when everybody was excited about it and, you know, would still come over and over again. The show, you can see this show like, you know, 100 times and see something different every time, which I think is one of the cool things about it. But even with that, it doesn't matter how good a show is if you don't know how to, you know, produce it in a landscape. Produce and market for it. And I think I just like kind of learned a lot. It was cool that we did it, and we had a whole like second wind with we can talk about it with Elaine showing up, which was like I think incredible, and one of like maybe the peak, maybe like the just like coolest moments of our lives.
Yeah. So the story there in a nutshell is that Elaine Hendricks, who plays Meredith Blake, the other woman to the dad in Parent Trap, she actually came and saw the show in New York. And as a result of the two of you tweeting at Elaine and Jessica Ann, what's her
Lisa
name?
Ann.
Lisa Ann.
Lisa Ann Walter, who plays Chessie.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both best friends, and so we've communicated with them, and like just kind of as we were putting it up in New York, reach out to them on social media, and we're like, you should see the show, and they're both like awesome, and they like respond on social media a lot to like fans and everything, and and Elaine was like in New York and able to come, and she brought Lisa Ann's nephew.
Yep. Aiden. Shout out.
Yeah,
Aiden.
and also,
Shout out to Aiden. It was so cool.
It happened to be the 20-year anniversary of the Parent Trap, which, believe it or not, we didn't realize.
Oh yeah.
But 2018 was this was 2018 and 20 years after the release of the movie, and so there was just a lot of things that were nice timing to make something very cool like that happen, and I think that is one big takeaway of the power of social media. That's one thing that I kept talking to people about, that when they're like, how'd you pull that off? And it's just like, without social media as a platform, that would never happen. Like the fact that you two directly got their attention, and we're able to capitalize on like the buzz of like, oh, it happens to be the 20th anniversary, and like Elaine is in New York now, and like that social media platform and doing something that's like kind of tongue-in-cheek, jokingly, because we also had a campaign at for Go Comedy trying to get Lindsay Lohan to come see the show, and we just did that as like a cute marketing ploy to advertise the show with a theme, basically. So we had kind of done stuff like that before, and you two were like kind of jokingly tweeting at them, but then once they actually start responding, it's like, that's a lesson to me of like, as long as your intentions and your heart's in the right place about that kind of reach out, you might as well, because you're just as foolish to think that it can't happen as you are to think that it might.
It's a great point.
Yep. And that also just kind of like, it was very confirming moving to New York and like having that moment happen so flawlessly and effortlessly. Like it really, we didn't try that hard. We literally just tweeted them and they responded. And I was like, okay, like this is like just very confirming why I moved. Not saying like, oh, I want like you know what I mean? Like it's taking performing to another level that can casually happen. Like we had a show on a Friday and we invited Elaine to come, and she literally said, for your 411, I will be there. Everyone was freaking out, and it was one of the most special performances I've ever had. It was so cool.
Truly. It might have been my favorite time doing it.
Oh yeah.
So on the flip side, and this is the thing that you don't get a lot of optics on, you know, something as cool as the Elaine thing happens, and people back home see that, or other people who didn't come to the show in New York see that. Like your friend's circle, people see that online, and it makes it seem like so elevated and awesome. But on the flip side, there were shows that we did where like one person came, or where there were like no paying audience. Like, I don't know. What did you learn from that side of things, of just like doing the show in it, just shouting into a void, you know?
I think it was a huge learning experience of like going from performing it to sold out houses, having it in the Matt and Oz variety show had a built-in audience. So we were like guaranteed a full house every time we did it. And then when that energy is gone from the audience, like that energy literally physically lifts us to new heights. And it is a very physical show and exhausting show, and literally like in between. So when we're doing all three parts, like I'm actually blown away by the fact that we at one point of iteration of the show, we would play like a little mini the credits for each part, like a movie, and we would take a sit backstage. But when we were doing it in New York, we were literally taking a sit backstage and coming back out, which I think is very impressive, especially because we're doing 3 different shows and all connected, of course. But without having any like laugh breaks, there is no time to, let's say, breathe. So it's like exhausting on a different level. And then not having that refuel of like laughter and like huge applause, that being gone we have to pump ourselves up and re-energize ourselves. And of course we can, because we do love the show and we have so much fun doing it, even if there's no one in the room. But that got exhausting.
Yeah.
That got really tough.
Completely agree. It takes so much energy to do this show, and so much steam is lost when like, okay, well, everyone who told me that they were going to come didn't come, and no one else came. I mean, even if there were even the shows where there were 4 people in the audience, I mean, they enjoyed it, and we can work off of that. We had fun with those 4 people. That's fine. But it just is so exhausting. I mean, to do this show in rehearsal when it's like, okay, are you ready to do a run of the show? It's like, okay, I got to gear myself up because this is going to take a shit ton of energy. And it's like, when you have a bunch of people there, it feels like nothing. And it feels like the adrenaline will just take you. But when there's no one, it's both the energy sucking of well, we should have marketed more. We're all of the business stuff starts coming in. Those thoughts I think are more depressing to me than the fact that there are 4 people. I'm like, I remember one show where once we started getting going, it was fine. But I just was like, I think I'm ready to be done with this. Not because I'm never done with this show. Obviously, I'll talk about it whenever. I will do the show whenever. We got invited to do the Women in Comedy Festival. This year obviously didn't happen because of COVID, but I will do this show whenever. But it's so hard to. I don't know how to market a 2-person show where. I just simply don't know, and that was very. It was really discouraging and disheartening. Again, not saying anything about the quality of our show. I know about that, but it was on the flip side of an affirming move to New York. It was fuck.
Yeah.
Again, not oh, be here, but this is just. I'm done.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we learned and talked about, and we had a friend of ours that coached an indie improv team of mine and Julia's, Tim, come watch the show and give notes on it. And I think his feedback really told me, because he was like, this, I'm going to be real, this is one of the best shows that I've seen in a long time. And he was like, 2 things. One, how difficult it is to describe it in just a couple sentences. It gets in your way more. And it's such a weird thing because most people will tell you, especially in New York, a place that's theater dense, entertainment dense, that do something unique, do something specific. And if you're wondering, is there such thing as something too unique and too specific? I believe the answer is yes. And it's called The Parent Trap. Lord of the Twins Trilogy.
Yeah.
But so that is the common mentality, and we thought that we were set up for that. Is that well, it's really unique. It's got this kind of built-in pop culture appeal, but at the same time, it's this unique twist and this allure to it. But it just wasn't enough to bring people in for whatever reason. So it's not some guarantee that you're gonna build an audience just because it sounds super crazy unique. And then the other thing is that Tim was saying in his feedback that well, you guys do a really great job of blending the Parent Trap and the Lord of the Rings thing, and it is so impressive like the meticulous movement and all that stuff. But it's just a little bit too alt theater for real theaters, and it's a little bit too storytelling and theatrical for improv theaters.
Totally.
So it's also in this mid ground of like where do you put it? What is the best medium? And without something like the variety show, which has variety built into it, there's plenty of that in New York City, but again, it's just like I don't know. It really made me appreciate the variety show as a medium. And the other thing that it made me really appreciate is anybody who's been in the tech booth for a show. Special shout out to Pete Jacokes, who is our usual partner in the sky, doing lights and sound for this show and for just almost everything that I've worked on. And I had to be the person in the booth and running tech, and the theaters out here for improv and sketch do not provide you with a tech operator. They don't have house operators most of the time, or at least not the ones that we were using. And so I had to hop in the booth and learn to do like Q labs and run some of the lights and sound and the kind of like troubleshooting and tech issues that would come up that I'm just like, I'm sorry, you guys, we're not going to be able to do the opening video tonight because I just can't get the projector working.
Yeah.
And we got to start. Or actually, you know what? I take back what I said just a moment ago is that we did have at least one tech person running the show, but to be able to hand off all these tech instructions and with a non-traditional formatted script that's like not in the usual format, and then be like, well, there's this and this, and there's also a video, and when she pulls the invisible sword and stabs the dragon, and the Lord of the Rings music plays. Like, it made me appreciate the house technicians and stage managers so much more.
And that's the thing. It's like when you bring up the marketing thing, you bring up stage managing, like. When we did it out here, we became a one-man band. Like, we're playing the cymbals, we're singing in the mic over here, we're tap dancing. That makes there's not enough time in the day for us to do all these things. So it's like it is unrealistic for us to like be our promo, our stage man. Like, you're also our director. Mm-hmm. You need to be like there, like, you know what I mean? So it's like that was too much to ask of you.
Yeah. Afterward, you two would be like, well, what would you think? And I was like, I don't know. I thought the music was too loud, and I'll fix it next time. Like, I can't really give effective notes on because I'm sweating it trying to figure out a new angle on it. And yeah, it is. It's a lot. It takes a team to really do, and 3 people even is not. There's still so many more hats to wear that 3 people can really take care of.
Yeah, that, and even like we don't have props in the show, but when we worked on another show after The Parent Trap, like the difference in New York is like carrying all this shit and like not being able to store it at a theater. Like, you have to take all of your cymbals and your tap shoes on your back and go on a full subway car and like hope that you don't like drop anything, or like your back is literally in pain, and then you go to the theater, do your thing, take it all home because you can't store it there. And there's so much more that is on the people in the show. And there is only 3 of us. Like, I can't imagine if there were more elements to it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about our last portion here, which is if you had to do it all over again, starting from scratch today, what would you do differently? And are there things that you would definitely keep the same about the Parent Trap process?
Oh, I think something that was a note from Tim was we recognized, I think we were so focused on paying attribute to the movie and like being so on with the characters and like getting our favorite parts in and like being so true to like the script and like paying true homage to The Parent Trap, which is like our favorite movie of all time. But what Tim pointed out was like, what is so great about the show is you two and how much you love it. And like, I want more of that. Like he wanted more of like Julia talking about when she was 8 years old and she had a Parent Trap themed birthday party. And, you know, like those true to us moments to the movie, because we didn't write the script of the movie, that isn't as important as our personal. And I think we learned that later. And I think we definitely leaned into that more in our New York iterations. But I didn't realize that was what made the show so great. And what was the most important was our point of view of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think we've gotten that note a couple times. I think one of the things I thought about, I don't think this is something I would do differently, but we had someone else view the show, another UCB kind of and director type, who said, well, time frame wise, if you want to submit it here, it needs to be 30 minutes. If you want to submit it here, it needs to be an hour. If you want to submit it here, it needs to be this. And it just never quite fit. And if you want to submit it here, it needs to be a little bit more like you need a game of it, or you need some sort of like thing or whatever. So anything that we would have done to submit to these places needed like a different thing. I would have loved to have been able to submit it to festivals that could get it seen. But it just, once again, never really fit in like the constraints of what like these festivals or wherever was like looking for.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want the show to be anything different, but it would have been cool to, and I think we were at the point where like didn't really make sense to change the show. We've been doing it for so long. It's like we were ready to do something new, but we wanted to just get the most out of this show that we could have without having to like really rewrite it into like a 30-minute version of itself or whatever. So I don't know. I think the only other thing. Oh yeah, respond to that, and then I have like one.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Nicole, for bringing that up, because I think I started to say that about Tim, about his feedback, and then I got myself on a tangent. And yeah, that is definitely like bringing in the perspective of the two of you, and when Julia says things like, you know, Hallie walked in like a badass in her jean jacket, and she was everything my 8-year-old self wanted to be. Like, there's a lot of that in part one, and it's there throughout each part, but it kind of decreases throughout the show. And I think that if we had a mission statement that was something additional to, or deeper than, I love the game of The Parent Trap is as epic as Lord of the Rings. And I think that we 100%ed that. You know, I think we nailed it. We really elevated the story. We embellished it to the most of your perspective and what it meant to you, and as a piece of storytelling. But I think finding places to add more in about how it like kind of shaped your view as young girls coming up, and whatever it is, like whatever has stuck with you so long, finding ways to keep that in the heart of the telling would be ideal. I will say the two parts that I'm most proud of in the show that really kind of hammer home how well we did it for the version that it is, or in the direction that it went. The ring moment when
My favorite part.
Meredith throws the ring and bounces off Nick's head, lands in Hallie's hand, and then it goes 100% Lord of the Rings world for the first time in the show is 100% Lord of the Rings, and you reenact the scene where Sam tries to shout at Frodo to throw the ring in the fires of Mordor. That's one of the consistently biggest laughs, biggest payoffs of the show. And then the other part on the other end of the spectrum is the cellar scene, where you do have like an honest and well acted sentimental moment of a scene between the mom and dad character and the wine cellar, and you share a glass of wine that they drank at their wedding is the scene, and then the line after you cheers and drink, and it's like this silent moment in the show, and then the line after it is, it tasted like a strong marriage. And just those two moments, the Lord of the Rings ring moment and the wine cellar scene, I think I'm really just proud of the way that we maxed out the style there. Like, you got this really heartfelt moment that leads to a laugh, and you got this really transformative genre moment snapping from Parent Trap to Lord of the Rings, and both of those things really paid off, I think, to their fullest.
Totally. Those were such good acting learning moments. Like, you directing, James, I remember when we did the wine cellar scene, like, you told us to pull from like our real life experiences and like thinking about like past breakups, or just like those moments where you feel that emotion that they're feeling in that scene. And that I always remember, like, I almost like mark to like bring myself to that place and I like truly get like teary eyed. And like, for the ring moment, I remember I visualized fire around me. Like, it was such a cool acting learning in those specific spots too. Like, I remember I mark, like, you visualize the fire, you visualize you're in that scene, like you're out of, that's where you are. And like, that was very cool.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is like those moments being so special are like I would want that to stay the same. Not exactly those moments, but to have a mission statement that we need those moments are like, this is not, neither one of those are funny on paper. You don't write that, read it, and laugh. It is the payoff of the context of the show overlapped into a moment, and so to aim at those moments, one that's highly stylized, like genre play, and one or like form basically, and one that is like emotionally rooted and acting driven. Like, I would want that to stay the same as a goal of the show. The other thing that I would change is just that improv side of things. I think that having more moments to improvise with each other built into it, and even like to talk to the audience, to ask a quick question or give a nod to get a reaction out of the audience, I think would be really helpful to just keep the energy alive. And also if we are going to end up with a lighthouse, is that like give you control over setting the tone in the room, regardless of the size of the audience or the familiarity of the space. And like you said, Nicole, like I think that just gives you the opportunity to, it gives you the belief and the like courage of, no matter what we do, we can go off and come back on track.
That's it's such a power, like, it is a confidence thing too, how we performed it. We stared in people's eyes. We looked at them in the eyes. And like, I think we leaned into that more too later on, like the clowning aspect of it, like being like, oh, cheer, or like, stop, don't clap right now. Like that control, or like that confidence, and like saying like, we are setting the tone no matter what is happening right now, is such a cool element. And I think that would have been cool to like lean into more. And like in the beginning is like the clowning aspect, or like, you know, like, oh, we're gonna like decide to like literally talk to this person about like, yeah, like, have you ever had this happen to you? Like, like have them respond. They're like, like leaning into that because it definitely
Yes.
lended itself to that.
Yeah, or even just to be like, I have an idea right now of just being like in a small-ish audience, just to point at people and be like, have you seen this movie? What about Lord of the Rings? Have you seen that? Okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
just to like get that opening connection with the audience, because again, just like the risk of, as a performer, having such a meticulously rehearsed show feel mechanical or on autopilot, you can have that even if you're way into it. You can have that same disconnect with the audience where they don't feel along for the ride. So finding those ways to tap into them would be great too. And yes, we did start toying around with it a little bit before we hung it up for the time being.
Completely agree. Those clown moments where we're allowed to be like, you haven't seen it, then you should actually leave. Like, you actually can't watch this then.
Yeah, spoilers,
or whatever. And then being able to like snap back into it. I completely agree. I think that like that would allow us to like control, whatever it is, and take it to like the next level, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
I wish we performed it in California for Lisa Ann. I have major regrets.
Me too.
About that. Because she said she would have
she would have produced it.
Yeah, like I think she said she would have hosted, or I don't know if we were gonna
yeah.
And because Elaine and Lisa Ann and also the rest of the cast is like so nostalgic for, like, they had a reunion recently. I just feel like we could have continued to like show the rest of the cast of the movie.
Honestly, I think we still could. I honestly think that it's something that we could do at like Second City or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that is like, if we would have been able to make that work, I think like that could have been cool. But maybe someday.
Yeah, it's not too late. But that was something I wish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Artistic goals.
Honestly, I one of the things I was gonna say was like travel it or tour it around a little bit. But I mean, we had been talking about it, like, just let's go do it places. But
yeah, and I think that maybe that's what I would have done too, is actually, instead of trying to produce it at a bunch of theaters in the city, one of the things that worked for the Elastic Time Canon actually was actually to go to a couple places outside of the city. And you get this kind of like people like, oh, there's a team in here from New York, whatever that association is for people that makes it seem cool. You can kind of take advantage of that, so to speak. And I think that we could have done that for this show too. It's exactly like those optics of social media, right? Where it's like people see the Elaine thing and are like, wow, but nobody really sees the 3 audience member nights. And it's like, it's the same thing, I think, when you go from New York to and try to put it up at a theater regionally outside the city, that people are like, this show's from New York. Little do they know, you know what I mean?
Totally.
But then what happens is then you're like, oh, we just got back from a tour.
Yeah.
So it might actually be a better way to like build an audience, is to travel out a little bit more. Would be definitely something that I agree would be fun to do.
Yeah.
It's like they say, when you need to get promoted for a job, leave the place that you're working and then get promoted somewhere else. It felt like we needed the right pair of eyes. I think that was like one of like the not frustrating things, but like at home, everyone knew us. So it was like, obviously they're going to hear about the show and come to the show. In New York, our like community of friends came many times. Love you guys. But I just think it was like, and then like there were times where like out of towners like happenstanced upon it, because it wasn't like the theaters marketing our show for us or giving us ideal show times sometimes, like that was part of it too.
You got to start at 11 p.m. or like 6 p.m.
Yeah, like on a school night, like you want to come. So like when those moments happened, I feel like we got such great feedback from like people. So it was just like being able to get those eyes on it somehow, or get that. So maybe, doing a tour or something would have helped that, but yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Anything that either of you want to plug, aside from Parent Trap?
Watch the movie. It's streaming on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah. Also, I own it on Amazon Prime, so you could come over and watch it.
DVD. We have it on DVD.
Just follow us on social media.
Yeah. There are Parent Trap Trilogy social media accounts, and then also, if you're meaning Julia and Nicole, follow them individually. We'll include all those links. Awesome. This has been so great. I'm glad that we took the time to really unpack it, because it's a show that's been part of all of our lives for a good 5 years now.
Totally.
I think that we did what we needed to do. If anybody's been watching the entire time, we love you. And I'll just in closing, Improv FAQ, you can find on YouTube and Facebook. That's where you're watching it now. We are also a podcast, and the most current stuff is going to be generally on YouTube, the most current and complete library of Improv FAQ content. But most of what we have, at least recently, is on Facebook. And then we are also just getting caught up and current with the podcast releases. The live episodes are the ones that are kind of behind schedule, but everything else you can find on the podcast Improv FAQ at length. Great. Nicole, go ahead.
Can I say one thing? I wouldn't change a thing also, because I learned so much from the show, and I wouldn't be in this hot apartment in New York probably without the show. I don't know.
Yeah.
Every single choice we made led us to where we are now, and a lot happened from that show, created me as the performer I am now, and like what I learned, and created the bond and family ship that we have.
Same here. This was a very unique experience, and one that will transcend all of our lives, our performing careers, I think, and then also has allowed us to do everything we've been doing now, for me at least. Yeah. Agreed.
There's a lot of really great things about this show, and I think if nothing else, if you work on a project of passion like this and it allows you to find your people, then you have gotten more than more than any show can give you on the page or on a stage, is the people that you work with
totally
off stage. Love you guys, and we will catch you next time on Improv FAQ at length. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.